What is up, guys? It is the Citrus Panda here today, and I'm coming at you with episode 2, or a review of episode 2 of World Trigger. Let's do this. In this episode, we've got a little bit of information that we figured out about Kuga himself. We figured out a little bit about Osamu, but mostly most of the information in this episode pertained to our little white-haired protagonist. Or, is he the protagonist? I don't know. I mean, there's a bunch of different main characters. I'd say Osamu might be the main character because he's, I don't know, like it doesn't really matter. But I would say Osamu is actually the main character, although Kuga is a secondary main character, as you get what I'm saying. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe you don't know what I'm saying. In this episode, we actually got up to almost the end of the first book. I'd say by next episode, they're going to catch up to volume 1 of the manga, which is kind of fast, but also it's pretty good. I mean, 3 episodes for 1 volume seems pretty good, honestly. Anyway, it starts off where the, it shows like the bullies or whatever they are, they're going to be taken in by border agents for protection. Quote-unquote protection. Now, we're going to go into that later, but that doesn't really matter. So, Kuga and Osamu are actually walking around in the city, and Kuga's kind of hungry. And Osamu's like, well, do you have any money? And then he's like, oh, I've got all this money. He takes out all this money because, you know, he's a neighbor. He doesn't really know all the stuff about, you know, probably shouldn't take out money and wave it around. Now, a lot of people saw that, and then Osamu was like, don't do that, you know, you can't do that. Now, originally, maybe they're in, like, a bad part of Japan, because I know that, like, every part of the world has bad parts in it, no matter how good it is, but in general, I'm pretty sure Japan is, like, a pretty safe place, like, compared to a lot of places, and I don't think even if you were waving around money, I don't think people would, like, come up and do this to you, but 1, I think it's for the comedy aspect, and 2, this is an anime, so it's not really real life, okay, so these guys come up, and the one says, my leg, you know, he runs into him, he taps him, basically, he's walking, and he accidentally hits him, and the one guy, he's like, oh man, my leg is broken, you know, I'm gonna need a doctor, I'm gonna need money for a doctor's visit. And obviously, he didn't actually break his leg, obviously, he was just trying to get money from, poor old Kuga, and, Kuga, he knew that the guy was lying about it. Now, how did he know he was lying? Actually, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. Never mind. Anyway, Kuga said, you know, your leg isn't broken. He knew that, and he basically just went over, kicked the guy's leg, and broke it. He broke the guy's leg, and then gave him money, because he's like, okay, that seems fair. Your leg is broken. Here's the money to go see a doctor. And that was pretty hilarious. I thought that was, like, really funny when I read that in the manga, and they actually animated it very well. I thought that was pretty funny. You know, like, oh man, you broke my leg, I need some money. He's like, well, I didn't break your leg, but I'll break it and then give you money so that I can go to the doctor. Either way, that was pretty good. Then, after that, a bunch of people come and then say that they need money for, like, their parents in a hospital or something like that. And he said, and then Kuga told him, well, if you're lying, I'm gonna smack you. And, Kuma looked him in the eye, and his eye kind of did like a weird motion, so I'm not sure if Kuga can actually tell if people are lying or not, or it's just obvious that they're lying. Either way, he just knew they were lying, beat the crap out of him. Osamu comes back, he's like, what did you do? They had some dinner at the park. They were eating like a burger or something. They talked a little bit about how you shouldn't use violence, again, you know, to combat violence, because Kuga grew up in a, well, we'll get to that later, but Kuga grew up in like a war zone. So, anyway, Kuga is walking across the street, gets hit by a car, but again, cars, they don't even do anything to him. The car gets completely crushed, but he doesn't, like, do anything. His, like, skin, like, peeled off, but then it just grew back. It, like, regenerated itself. So, after that, that's pretty much what happened in that part of the day. Then they go up on the rooftop the next day. Kuga and Osamu are talking about how they shouldn't really talk about what they've been talking about. And the bullies come up on the roof, and they're, you know, harassing some kid. Osamu tries to stop it, but obviously he's not going to be able to stop it, so he didn't. Then Kuga came up and he did it non-violently, and he you know, slammed the ground and they left. But before that, the bullies actually had protection. Now, I talked about this earlier, and what happened to the bully people is that they actually got their memories wiped. What Border does is that they take in people who have, you know, seen things that they probably shouldn't have seen, and they wipe their memories for like a day or so, like a day back, and they wipe their memories, and it's called protection, because it's supposed to protect you, and you're not supposed to know secret things. So, they had completely forgotten that any of this stuff with Kuga ever happened, and they got scared, so they went on their merry way. Right after that, they actually go into the classroom, and there are some students talking with Kuga and Osamu, and they are just talking about, where did you come from? And he's like, well, they don't even know about any sports, or Kuga doesn't know any sports. And since he didn't even know what soccer was, that rolls out a lot of places because, Europe is really big on soccer. Although soccer is, it happens in the United States, it's not really popular as per se baseball and American football and everything else in the United States. So they kind of narrowed out Europe because soccer is very popular in Europe, from what I understand. But what he actually said, whenever they said, well, what was popular, and he said, well, I guess war. War was popular where he came from. Now, they assume that he grew up in a war-torn country, which technically he did. Every single country that, in the dimension that he came from, in the world he came from, must have been at war, and he grew up in that type of, in that type of area. And that is obviously not a good place to live, but his reactions and his battle skills and everything else, that's because he grew up in a war-torn area where he had to know those types of skills to survive. Now, an interesting point in this episode that we also figure out is that the neighbors are wrongly called neighbors. The actual things that attack are called Trions. Trion soldiers or whatever. They have different names for them, but in general they are considered Trions, which are basically soldiers for the neighbors. The neighbors are like humans on Earth. So, like, Kuga is a neighbor, but those big things that come and attack, those aren't neighbors, they're Trions. Now, I'm not sure if Border knows this. I'm assuming maybe the higher-ups know this, because we haven't really met any of the higher-ups in Border. We only know Osamu. He's probably not too advanced in the rankings or anything. But in general, if we look at this from a standpoint from afar, I guess, I'm assuming that maybe the higher-ups at Border do know this kind of stuff, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, this episode ended where two Trion soldiers, they were called Marmos or something, Marmots, I forget what they were called, but they attacked the school, and everybody's, freaking out because they're like, well, why are they inside, this area? Border set up a thing, like, where it's supposed to only occur in one area, like around Border, but this was happening way out here. And, say this is the area that they're supposed to be in, well, they're spawning out here. So, the only problem with that is that this might even happen even more. And, Osamu runs out, and he's like, I'm going to do my best to protect these people. And he takes out his trigger, and that's where the episode ends. Now, another interesting fact to note is that there is, Anohara, or something like that, Anohara, maybe that's her name? It's the girl that looked out the window, and she's like, neighbors here, and she started running backwards, but then she ran into like the strict teacher, and he said, let's go to the bunker or whatever. Now this is interesting because maybe she was going to try to help. Now the only reason I know this is because of the opening. I read the first volume of the manga, and I'm not figured out about that girl yet. But if you look at the opening, in the sequence in the opening, she's one of the girls with a sniper rifle, so I would assume she is a border agent or a future border agent or something to do with killing those things, and she wanted to turn around to go help and, save these kids. But Osamu, I already know what's going to happen, but I don't want to spoil it for anybody, so Osamu's going to fight them next chapter, and we'll see what goes on. So, until next time, and not next chapter, next episode, I'm talking about the wrong kind of media. Anyway, until next time, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode review, and I'll see you guys next time.